Howdy YouTubers. Today I'm going to show you how I polish fog lights, headlights, taillights, whatever you need polished out back to a like new condition. Here I've got my fog lights off my car. I replaced them with some LED headlights or fog lights that work a lot better, but there's a guy that needs my old ones. So I said I'd polish them up for him, and this is one that is done that I already did. It's kind of a 6-step process. We'll be using some sandpaper, and then once we go through 4 steps of sandpaper, we will then go to 3 steps of polish with a 6-inch polishing random orbital buffer. Now I know you're like, why is this guy in his kitchen? Well, if you look outside, it's about 30 degrees out and it's the middle of winter. So that's why I'm in my kitchen doing this inside. I'll try and set this up here so that way you can see everything I'm doing. There we go. So we're going to start out with 320 grit sandpaper. And I like to wet sand everything. You can use a spray bottle, you can use a bottle of water, just pour it on there every so often. What the wet sanding does is it helps keep the dust out of the sandpaper from the plastic. It helps keep the sandpaper clean and keep it effective. But pretty simple. We're just going to sand the lens. Do your best to keep water out of the inside of the lens assembly, and it's pretty just straightforward. Just sand the lens to get rid of any imperfections. Now there's a pretty good rock chip right here. I'm not going to be able to get that out, but this will work to get any other smaller scratches, hazing, minor pitting, yellowing. It'll take all that minor surface imperfections out and bring it back to almost like new condition. So it's pretty much just sand in small circles all the way around the entire lens, and you don't want to stay in one spot. You always want to keep on moving it around so that way you don't create any low spots, and that way you get even coverage, so that way you have a even finish when you're done. Now I'm not using hard pressure, I'm just using light to moderate pressure. The sandpaper is what's doing the work. You just want to let the sandpaper do the work. You don't want to try and rush it. Take your time. Make sure you get all the way around, get up towards the edges. And it's going to start to fog over on you, haze over. That's perfectly fine. We're going to fix that later on. You actually want to make sure everything is completely hazed over like that. Still got to get around some of the edges here. With a 320 grit, you don't need to take a whole lot of time. Just a couple minutes. Make sure you get a nice even haze over everything. And then, if you think you got everything, it's a good idea to take some paper towels, dry it off, and see where you're at. It's going to look completely hazed over, real milky looking. That's perfectly fine. With the 320 grit is where you're going to get your deepest imperfections out. That looks, well, I'll do just a little bit more. See a couple of spots on here. Now I'm not gonna time lapse or skip any parts because I want you to see how long it takes. It doesn't take too long at all. Maybe a half hour per lens. You don't want to use too hot of water, just some lukewarm. And there we go. Now we're done with the 320 grit. Now we can move on to 600 grit. It's pretty milky right now. Don't worry about that. It's going to come clear as we work our way up the sandpaper and into the polish. Now as you work your way up the sandpaper, you want to take a little bit more time with each one, because basically what you're doing is with the 320 grit, you are making lots of deeper scratches, but not so deep. They're not as deep as, let's see, how am I trying to put it? It's deep enough to get out the deep imperfections that you're trying to get rid of, and then what you're doing with the next higher grit sandpaper is you're smoothing out the scratches from the previous grit, the more coarse grit, using the finer grit sandpaper. And as you work your way up, the surface becomes more and more smooth and has finer, smaller scratches up until you get to the polish, where that then takes out those tiny scratches. It makes them so small they're invisible, and it becomes a mere finish. That's how sanding finishing works. So you're basically removing a small amount of material from the surface to get rid of any imperfections in that surface. So this will work 2 or 3 times over, say I finish these in like 5 years, they become pitted and worn again. You can do this again, but depending on how deep you go with the sandpaper and trying to get imperfections out, the lens may become too thin, so you can only do it a couple of times. It's just that you have to play by ear, kind of. You can see I've got the one rock chip right here that I'm not going to be able to get out, but everything else is going to smooth out nicely. So you can see it's still pretty milky, hazy looking, but it's a little bit better than when we were using the 320 grit. Now once we're done with the 600 grit, we can move on to 1000 grit. If your lenses aren't as bad as mine were, you can start out with 400 or 600 grit. If you've just got a yellow haze over it, you can start out with 400, maybe 600 grit, and work your way up. But mine were pretty bad, so that's why I started out with the 320 grit. Alright, that's looking pretty good for the 600 grit. Alright, now we move on to the 1000 grit. And just same thing, just work your way around, don't stay in one spot. Make sure you cover every square inch. And as you work your way up the sandpaper, you'll be able to see the lens become more and more clear. And the reason why when it's wet like that it looks clear, but as soon as you dry it off it looks even more hazy, that's because the water fills in some of those micro scratches and makes it look clear when it's actually not. But don't worry about that. We will take care of that with the further up we go. You can do this while it's on your car. You can do it by taking your lens assembly off the car. It works either way. It is a little bit safer to pull the lens assembly off your car, so that way you don't actually slip off and onto the paint. You can do it on your car by protecting your paint by taping around the edges and then laying paper or plastic or something else to protect your car in case you do slip off. So you can do it on or off your car. That's entirely up to you. I find it a lot easier to just take it off the car, bring it to wherever you need to, so it's a little more comfortable for you, so that way you don't have to worry about scratching your car, because if you scratch your paint, that's an entirely different subject. Now this sandpaper is like, I don't know, less than $5 per pack at O'Reilly's, I think, if I remember right. Don't quote me on that. The polishing compounds, I'd guess they're close to $5 to $15 per bottle. You can go that route after you're done sandpapering, or you can use a clear, high gloss clear coat when you're done sanding the lens. That will basically take the place of filling in the last bit of scratches from the sandpaper. If you put a nice even thick coat over this, it will create a nice smooth surface and clear up your lens that way. You can do it that way, or you can do it my way with the polishing, which is actually going to last a lot longer because then you don't have to worry about the clear coat fading. Even if you do get the one with the UV protection in it, it's still possible it could fade and yellow over time. So I believe this is a more permanent solution to cleaning up your lenses of your headlights or fog lights or any other kind of light you may have on your car. With today's headlights from the newer cars, I've heard of a pair of headlights being over $1,000 for an OEM replacement. It's like, holy cow. Alright, so we are done with our 1000 grit. We will now move up to 2000 grit. And I'll show you the lens is looking a bit clearer with that 1000 grit sandpaper. Now with this 2000 grit, it's going to be even more clear when we're done with it. Just take your time, make sure you get all the scratches out that you want out of it. If you rush it and be sloppy, you're not going to be pleased with your result at the end. You can probably hear that this makes less of a scuffing sound with the 2000 grit compared to the 1000 or more coarse grit that I've used previously. You can even read the lettering that's printed on the inside there, up around the edge. There, you can see it. You can see that pretty clearly now. If you do get any water, like I have inside there right there, if you do get any water in there, let it dry completely before you stick it back on the vehicle and stick your bulb in there. Because otherwise the water, the heat from the bulb will cause the water to steam and fog over your lens. And you don't want that. You want it to be completely dry when you stick your bulb back in and seal it up. So right now we're at a little over 16 minutes and we're already halfway done. So just a little bit of time on your weekend to pull the lens out and clean them up can save you a lot of money versus going and buying new lens assemblies from the dealer or even aftermarket. It's a lot easier to spend, say, $50 for some sandpaper, some polish, and maybe even a buffer if you want it to go quicker, versus spending a couple $100 for a new lens. I'd say we're pretty much done here with the 2000 grit. It's looking pretty clear. So yeah, with the water on it still, looks nice and clear. But as soon as we dry it off with some paper towels again, it's going to go back to that hazy. Don't worry about it. The buffing will take that out. Go ahead and dry it off a bit. And now for the buffing, I'm going to start out with this slightly more coarse Meguiar's #1 medium cut. And then for your buffing pad, you have 3 different kinds that come in this pack at O'Reilly's. You've got a more hairy type fiber, a longer fiber, and then you're going to have what feels closer to a microfiber, and then you're going to have a super soft kind of like foam pad. The one with the longer fibers on it, that's going to be for your heavy coarse cutting compound, and then your middle smoother you're going to use with your fine cut, and then the foam pad one you're going to use with your polish. Now, I'm just going to simply take the pad, stretch it over the buffer, get it nice and even on there. Now you don't need a whole lot. This is already dried from when I did the first lens. So you want to shake it up, make sure it's nice and mixed very well. The medium cut, oh geez, that's a little too much. It's a little runny. So you just want to spread that out on the pad so that way it doesn't sling off when you turn it on at first. And now again with slightly moderate to light pressure, you're just going to take it on there, turn it on, and just walk it around. And when you're buffing with a buffer like this, you want to make sure that the buffing compound does not dry out, because that can throw swirl marks back into your lens, or if you're doing this on your paint job or anything like that, you can throw swirl marks back into your whatever you're buffing if the compound dries out. But you'll see that when we're done here in a few seconds, this will be just about clear enough that you can go throw it on your car after this step if you want, or you can do the other two buffing compounds after this. And if you don't have this buffer and you don't want to spend the $20 to $40 or whatever it was to buy one, you can buy those microfiber hand pads and do it by hand also. It's just going to take twice as long. So now we can just wipe that off. And you'll see the haze is pretty much gone. So if you wanted, you could go throw this on your car after it dries out inside. But we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to take this heavy cut pad off, and we are going to throw our second pad on. So you gotta stretch it over like so. Get it on there evenly. That looks good. And now shake up your second one. If you get any dirt on here, wash it off right away first. You don't want any dirt or contaminants on your buffing pads. That will just scratch up your lens again and you'll have to start over. So now this one is going to be more of a paste. It's not going to be as runny. You just need a little bit, you don't need a whole lot. And again, just spread it out on your pad. So that way when you first turn it on, it doesn't sling all over the place. Oops. Hit the power button there. Alright. Now, same thing. Just going to walk it around. Just a nice moderate, slightly less than moderate pressure. Just walk it around. Don't stay in one spot. And if you wipe it off and you find out that the haze isn't quite gone like you want it to, just throw on just a little bit more compound. If it's dried up, throw a little bit more on to moisten it back up, and just go a little bit longer. Now I can already see it's pretty clear before I even wipe it off. You can even rinse it just a little bit if you want to. And a little too much water inside. Oh well. Just let it sit out, dry out a little bit. But there, you can see it's nice and clear again. If you want, you can stop here and go throw it on your car after it dries out, or you can go on to the polishing stage. And again, just peel off the pad, stick on your polishing pad. Sometimes this can be a little bit of a pain to stretch the pad over it because it is a fairly tight fit, but you'll get it on there. Just take your time. Time is key for quality. Alright, so you got your softest pad on there now, free of any debris, dirt, dust. Now you're going to take your polish, give that a quick shake, and stick that on there. That's about all you need. And again, just smear that into the pad so that way it doesn't sling off when you first turn on the machine. And same thing, just walk it around. Now you should definitely be able to see getting really clear. If it's not clear by this point, you need to go back to either the 1000 or 2000 grit, or you can first try your heavy cut compound to try and bring out the shine to get rid of any haze that might still be left in there. But if you spent enough time on each one and you covered all the areas nicely, got an even coverage between each step, there shouldn't be any spots that you missed. See, when you get to this part is when you'll find out if you went too fast and skipped a step or didn't spend enough time on a step. You're going to see it in the end here. Now get a fresh piece of paper towel. Get a little wet. Wipe it off. Clean up around the edges. Now get a clean towel, clean dry towel. Dry it off completely and see how well you've done. It should be, unless you have deep chips like I've got in mine, it should be looking as if it were brand new out of the box for your lens. Should have a nice clean shine on there. Should be extremely smooth to the touch. You shouldn't be able to feel any imperfections in there. Should be nice and smooth. And you'll see that as soon as I drip some water on there, it runs right off. I'll bring it down here so that you can see a little better. It just runs right off as if you had a fresh coat of wax on there. That's how you know it's nice and smooth. Dry that off again. Shake off any excess. And you see I got some water in there. I'm gonna have to let this dry. You can try and blow some air in here to try and help dry it out faster, but just set it on a clean towel or something nice and soft so you don't scratch the lens you just buffed out. Let it dry, bulb opening up so that way the water can get out. So that's pretty much how you clean and buff your lenses to like new condition from either yellowing, pitting, hazed over, any of those surface imperfections. This will take it all out back to like new. So here's the other one I did earlier. They're both like brand new except for a couple of the rock chips in there. Those are too deep. I won't be able to get them out without making the lens too thin. So, and if you want to finish it off, you can either throw some wax on it, some Rain-X glass cleaner with rain repellent. You can wax it. Use a hydrophobic wax or any other kind of protectant, sealant to help protect and keep your lenses clean for a long time. So you should now be able to get another 5 to 10 years depending on your climate conditions and road conditions and what kind of weather you drive in. Several years of good use out of this. So hope you liked the video. Comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. Leave any comments below.